Hello, everyone, and possibly even every more than one. Welcome to My Kind of Country, an integral stage series exploring nationhood, politics, and the civic spirit. What is national intersubjectivity? What creates, sustains, or impedes the vital, self evolving, and self reorganizing and self honoring ethos that must be shared among citizens, enterprises, and all levels of institutions of government? How have our experiences and intuitions of the shared soul of the nation been informed by our lifetime of engagements and perspectival transformations? Fuck it, let's find out. Today we're joined by the inimitable culture theorist and philosopher Rachel Haywire to discuss her recent manifesto on American futurism, her take on the weird dialectical relationship between the culture spirit and the future, and more generally her personal feelings and experience of the American national vibe and its discontents. Hey Rachel, nice to see you. Great posture.
Hello, thank you. Happy to be here.
First of all, great name. I grew up on a farm, so there's a visceral colloquial vibe in my heart around Haywire. Second of all,
Funny farm. I grew up on a funny farm.
the American spirit. Is it a real thing? Is it a useful metaphor? Has it always been marketing bullshit? What's your relationship to the American spirit?
Everything that you just asked is yes. I'm just going to get that out of the way. Every question you just asked me, the answer is yes. So American Spirit, this is going to offend a lot of your audience. I believe that it has been co-opted by California Orientalism, which has taken the Occidental spirit out of America. And I believe that this resurgence of this vitalist energy in Trump's America will bring back the Occident to America and allow us to form a vitalist uprising to create a new cultural vanguard. And I call that national futurism.
What for you are some of the basic characteristics of the American soul at its best?
Builders, innovators, creatives, astronauts, pioneers, everyone from the hackerspace artist to the engineer that is creating a new biomechanical model of the human species to bring us to a higher state of human evolution.
I'm in Canada, so we are leftist from the American point of view. Most of the people I know are broadly center left or progressive in their sensibility, and that's often the kind of person who evolves into a more complicated relationship to pluralism and becomes meta or integral or centered in some notion of the emerging network civilization, right? There's a real left leaning spirit to that. But a lot of the people I know in the United States who would normally vote Democrats were tempted by or actually did vote for Trump in this last election because their heart wouldn't let them vote for the Democratic Party. What's your sense of the validity of Trump, or like why is the movement or the mood of this moment leaning toward those sorts of figures and factors?
Well, you can argue that every few centuries or even every few decades, depending where you are as a historian, that there is a realignment. Realignment occurs where the left and the right either merge together in what people would call a red brown alliance or a populist uprising revolt. Some people just consider the tides of history turning in a Spenglerian sense. I remember 15 years ago, maybe even 20. You know Scott Alexander, right? Slate Star Codex. I'm now Astral Codex 10. He wrote an article a while ago. It was called "Right is the New Left," and I think that he could see what was coming, which was this realignment of our national character, where things like anti-globalism, which were previously left-wing, had now become right-wing. The supporting of freedom of speech, left-wing issue. Now it's a right-wing issue with all the cancellations. Now the right was against censorship. So I think that when people say the left didn't, I didn't leave the left left me, that's what they're referring to. I believe that the right is more creative now and more vitalist in a way that the left once was, that it no longer is. When the left became sanitized and monolithic, all of the creative energy went to the right. But I will say that with a caveat. The right is now too high on its own supply. It's become a breeding contest. It's becoming kind of boring and dull. It's about breeding now. It's, who can have the most kids to look the most normal. That's kind of what we were getting away from, when we shifted from the left to the right. So now, I don't want to be crude and use the term third positionist because it has a lot of historical baggage. But I'm definitely beyond left and right. I am not either of these things. I don't abide by either of these doctrines, which is why I formed my own political party, the National Futurist Party.
Well, I'm very excited to talk to someone who uses Spenglerian as a casual adjective and considers the idea of taking a third position to be perhaps dangerously crude. So, welcome.
Yeah.
One of the things that comes up for me is, people ask each other questions about a lot of firsts, right? They're like, when was the first time you had sex? What was your first job? What was your first psychedelic experience like? I'm curious for you, if you could share like your earliest memories, maybe your firstness of noticing, hearing, feeling that you were part of something called America. When did you notice that you were part of the American cultural field?
I was at Burning Man. It was 2017. I was at center camp and I was talking to our Republican. We were both in line to get, I think it was hot chai tea. It was the only thing that they were selling at Burning Man. Everything else was a gift giving economy, but we just wanted our chai tea. And we were waiting in line. And he said, I think I'm the only Republican here. But I really like the survival aspect of Burning Man. It has this American root to it. And I thought, here I am at Burning Man talking about America with probably one of the only Republicans on the playa. And after we got our chai teas, I brought him to my friend's theme camp. It was actually Alex Gray. He was doing an exhibit with Allison Gray on psychedelics. And I said, hey, you want to check out my friend's art? And I could feel myself at the pinnacle of America. I was at Burning Man bringing a Republican to see my friend's psychedelic art. I felt like this was the quintessential American experience.
Nice. So I was excited to receive your American Futurist Manifesto in my Substack email. Um, I think the aesthetic of it is interesting, right? And obviously we're playing around with it, but it has a certain kind of early 20th century vibe when people felt like big things were possible, that America was in some kind of war with the Soviet Union to be the place that implemented and instantiated innovation. And that was exciting. But I'm curious more generally about what the vibe, what the aesthetic of futurism is going to be like. Because when I think about it, I feel like there needs to be a vibe that exceeds the existing political polarizations. I feel like I want to see solar panels in the back of a beaten up pickup
Uh,
truck. I want to see
yeah,
Jack Daniels and kale. I want to see I want to see a mood that goes beyond the current limitations. What's your sense of the I don't know, the aesthetic vibe of what futurism requires at this moment?
that's a great question. And I'm all for the Americana that you speak of, though I think there's a bit of an anti intellectual current in the American Rust Belt. I'd like to see more people in the Rust Belt read more philosophy. Let's start with that. Aesthetically, we need to go for something that is very accidental, very vitalist, very frontierist. I know you alluded to the frontier spirit of America. So everything from spaceships to rocket ships to high technology merged with high art, art that provokes, art that challenges. I am the author of the New Art Right, as I'm sure you know. It's not about left for right, it's about the art right. It's about the emergence of this new cultural vanguard. Talking about different types of aesthetics. Picture Italian futurism mixed with Americana mixed with Art Deco. Eutheris, for example, Marilyn Monroe, all of these artists and architects on the frontier resurfacing for this new aesthetic emergence on the American world. The American world, it needs its own aesthetic. It needs an American aesthetic. We need an American aesthetic as national futurists. What is America? What does that look like? We haven't really defined an aesthetic for America yet. You have the jokes about Trump going to McDonald's. You have your Southern Gothic images. You have, your PC liberal, you know, everything needs to look the same, be the same, woke politics, blah, blah, blah. But what does America look like? And that's what we're defining now. And I believe that starts with Art Deco because Art Deco was essential in building America as we know it. You think about like the original construction of Gotham. So yeah, kind of like a resurgence or reemergence, but also effective accelerationism using that technology to incorporate this aesthetic of frontierist building of this uplifting, optimistic technological renaissance, combining that with the avant-garde spirit of American underground culture, industrial music, surrealist art house film, all of that. And, we're mixing it together and defining America. That's national futurism, the definition of America.
Okay, beautiful, exciting. I'm interested in some particular examples. I'd love to hear some things that you've encountered in your cultural life that really turned you on to what the American spirit could be, and maybe also some things that seemed like they were attempting to do that, but absolutely failed to actually accomplish it. Like,
I went on a field trip, I think it was fourth grade. It was to Kennedy Space Center.
mm,
I grew up in South Florida, and Cape Canaveral was 5 hours away. And I remember going to the NASA museum and loving being there. I just felt a really bold presence there. I love that. But I also felt like it was kind of talking down to us, and I understand, the museum was for children and it was a family thing, but I felt like it could have gone further. And I remember even then at that age, just kind of like wanting to to tinker with it a little bit. I'm like, well, we're at the Kennedy Space Center. Shouldn't we be able to have more rides? I wanted it to be more like a carnival. Even then, I was thinking about like what would a carnival with the spaceships look like? What if we created? What if we made this more like Disney World? I started thinking about Epcot Center. I don't know if you know about Frontierland and Epcot Center. That was so cool. I just love the idea of Frontierland. It was about a world of imagination. Willy Wonka, step with me into the world of imagination, that thing. So I was thinking, okay, well, what if we upscaled the Kennedy Space Center? That was the first time that I started to like really think about tinkering with it.
beautiful. My parents took me to live in the Bahamas when I was a kid, and when we came back, we stopped off in Florida and we watched uh, the space shuttle before the one that blew up. So like
Ooh.
the last real launch. And it was
Yeah.
amazing to me. It felt like I was encountering the pyramids. It felt like it had that kind of monumental scale to it. I was really impressed. But I'm excited by what you're describing as the carnival because it feels to me like the spirit of Buffalo Bill, the spirit of
Yeah.
Walt Disney, that these are essential to the American spirit. And I don't see anything like that coming out of the Democratic Party. I see the Republicans
Right.
kind of collapsing in the face of a figure like that.
Yeah, yeah,
But
exactly.
it just seems to me, how do you, I mean, this is an interesting question. How do you keep the frontier spirit going when it's the 21st century and not the 19th century?
That is the question. Honest response, like from a hard materialist answer. It's a tiny vanguard. You're putting yourself in the front line. You're taking a lot of risks. People are going to think you're crazy. People might not have any idea what you're talking about. You just have to keep pushing until you attain a critical mass. I know if you understand, how markets fluctuate, right? And once a certain amount of movers are past a certain point, then everybody comes along. There was a book about it. It was called "Here Comes Everybody." Super like commercialized midwit book, but it was about what happens after something attains critical mass. And you have to know when you're doing it that people are going to look at you like you're a little out there. But then they come along and they do the same thing. So you have to start in the front lines. You have to be on the ground. You have to do it when people aren't ready for it. You have to construct civilization in your own image, for the beauty of your nation. And when people come around, they do. And they might try to taint it. They might try to water it down, and make it more palatable. But that's just the way that capitalism works. And you need to stay pure and true, hold on to your vision, and never let anybody take that from you.
As an outside observer of the American electoral process, I'm watching this recent election and there's lots of fascinating pieces to it. But I hear almost nothing about the future. I don't hear anything about the future from either side in any significant way. I don't really hear ecology or AI or new technology. It's exciting to see Elon Musk involved, but in the general political discourse, there's no sense of future. And I wonder how much of that is age, how much of that is gerontocracy, how much of that is the boomers. So, from your point of view, how much do you think the need for futurism is sabotaged by the sheer fact that the people who have the money and the power are post 60, post 70 in a really interesting way?
It's funny that you mentioned that because the original futurists were all about the vitality of the youth. And it was the vitality of the youth that was meant to usher in a new political regime. So, did Elon pick up on this vitality of the youth when he was promoting Trump to level democracy? I think he did, like from a market perspective. I think he understood that there was this disenfranchised demographic of, like young Nietzscheans who were ready for a bold new America. And I think he marketed to them pretty well. I think they really understood aesthetics. Not exactly. I'm not even sure that they understood Nietzsche. They were just, quoting Bronze Age Perger, and he did a little bit to, get people into Nietzsche. I'm not speaking entirely negatively of him. But how many people really understood it? Not so many, but the ones that did, we really did. We got together and we formed the National Futurist Party. I found them and I said, hey, do you want to be a part of the National Futurist Party? We're building an American aesthetic. We're creating a counter-relate that's based on superior aesthetics. And we want you to be a part of this thing. We want American fashion designers. We want American architects, and we want to create an aesthetic for America together. We want to build America right here, right now, I said progress cannot keep up with us. Progress is too slow. Progress has held us back. We have no use for progressives. We have no use for conservatives. We're not progressives. We're not conservatives. We're not elites. We're not populists. We are national futurists. We are something else.
So, as far as I can tell, in the United States, there are a number of attempts to present both third parties politically, but also third sensibilities. I know that Brett Weinstein's Unity Party and Andrew Yang's Forward Party, these are attempts to create some kind of pragmatic mobilization that isn't left or right. What is it that American futurism has that they don't have?
National futurism,
Mhm.
just to be clear. And it's pretty much the same thing, but we chose the name the National Futurist Party because it was provocative, and also because we are nationalists. We're not, the the Wignat type of nationalists. We're not like that, but we believe in America. We believe in America being for Americans. We think that America is an American country and that Americans should be highlighted here. We should be hiring Americans. We should be funding American tech companies. We should be promoting Americans who do things for America to make America beautiful. We need to make America beautiful again. I mean, that's a big part of it for me. There actually is like a civic arts council, I believe is the name of it, under the Trump administration now. There was even an initiative when Trump was president before where he only wanted beautiful architecture. He wanted to demolish ugly buildings. Um, this is happening. I think that we need beautiful monuments of American figures. People like Lou Rockefeller. Why isn't there a Rockefeller monument? Maybe there is, but I don't know about it. But it doesn't seem like there is. Why don't we have a monument for Hugh Ferris? Why don't we have a Marilyn Monroe monument? Why don't we have statues of some of the greatest American figures? What about Neil Armstrong? Why isn't there a statue of Neil Armstrong? You would think that there would be. Even Amelia Earhart, I could just name so many incredible American pioneers, who were on the frontier. We need monuments of them. We need statues of them. And we need to find the new ones. We need to find the new people who are following in these footsteps, and we need to highlight them. And they might not be in Elon Musk's inner circle. There still is a bit of nepotism there. Despite the fact that Elon did so much to help Trump get in power, I don't want to get into like how democracy had always been, how democracy had been rigged for a while, and how Elon, actually did come in and like level it out. Because I'm not a huge Elon fan at the moment. I love what he's done for our country, but I think that what he's doing with the DOGE program, it's a beautiful idea. And it's straight out of Yarvin's playbook, Curtis Yarvin. Destroy all government employees. I'm sorry, retire all government employees. Rage. America has become incompetent, right? We have a competency crisis that has slowed down the service of everything. The lockdowns in America completely gutted our economy. It made everything too slow, and people suffered at the hands of this competency crisis. The degrowthers became very, very popular. It was all about like homesteading and like, no, we need growth in the cities. We need to revitalize the cities, and we need to make these American cities that have American attractions. I think Elon, I feel, mixed feelings toward him. There's a part of me that just like wants to punch him in the face. I'm like, no, we don't need nepotism. We need meritocracy, right? Like that's why we have Trump. That's why we voted for Trump, because we want meritocracy. We want to get rid of the DEI. We want to get rid of, like this academic, you have to have gone to this university, to be a part of this elite. We want a counter elite, and the counter elite should be based on merit. It shouldn't be based on like who went to whose dinner party in the Bay Area. Maybe I'm going off on a tangent here, but not okay. And there's the thing, like the core American energy, it's rebellious, right? It's renegade. It isn't like prim and proper, and it isn't Oriental. I'm sorry, Neo-Oriental, but it isn't California Buddhist. It's raw, it's powerful, it's confrontational. America is rebellious and renegade. It isn't, you know, like everything needs to be like, no, it's not. It's in your face. It's bold. It's bold. America is bold. America is bold. America is brave.
So I'm curious about a kind of a tension that I hear in all that, in the sort of make America beautiful again stance, which is, on the one hand, a sophisticated attitude about aesthetics that's philosophically informed. And on the other hand, the kind of aesthetics we see connected with Trump and Musk, which have a certain kind of crudeness and simplicity to them, right? As if Trump's notion of aesthetics is just to have his own name in big gold letters, as if he was the retarded son of a Renaissance patriarch or something
I
like that,
know.
right? So,
Yeah.
like, how do we balance the rebelliousness against the over academic and over professionalized notion of sophistication, while also trying to get an aesthetic revival that isn't dumb and crude?
That is the right question, especially because so many of the current elites, dare I say counter elites, they don't understand aesthetics, let alone the avant garde. Like they don't understand art, they don't understand taste. You go into one of their homes, it does not look very powerful at all. It looks very subdued, it looks very boring. Not a fan. Um, I'm launching an art gallery in New York City. We're doing a launch party in March, and it's all about American art, American beauty, American energy, national futurism, the future of America. I think we have to do it ourselves. We can't count on the elites or even like this nepotism that the nepotist faction. There's a mouthful that we can't count on the nepotist faction of counter elites to do it for us. We, the real counter elite, need to do it ourselves. This is actually a DIY project. This is very punk rock. This is like founding fathers. We're creating America with our bare hands. That's what this type of project is.
Hmm. National futurism, and I said American futurism, you corrected me to national futurism. But the thing about national futurism is it's in some ways more generic than American futurism. It can apply to any nation that exists. Do you imagine American futurism taking place in a community of Russian futurism, Chinese futurism, Canadian futurism, Brazilian futurism? Is that what you're imagining?
Not exactly. I mean, we do want ambassadors. We consider ourselves cosmopolitan nationalists, dark romantics. So, yeah, we're all about nationalist pluralism, but we're focused on America herself, America the beautiful. Um, American futurism, it also works. I mean, obviously, we're American futurists, but national futurists, it's more provocative. It's more confrontational. It's in your face. Sometimes you need a little bit of agitprop to really get people going. You need to give people ideas that will challenge them and make them a little bit uncomfortable. But it's clearly stated in the manifesto that we're about American growth. We're about, do you want me to read some parts of it to you?
Please, yeah, go for it.
Okay. So we need an American futurism. That's how I open the manifesto. We need a national futurism. We need to rebuild our country and get ourselves out of this degrowth era. We need to revitalize the cities. We need to move forward. We need to accelerate. We need to reanimate our nation. Progress can no longer keep up, and the future cannot wait.
Hmm. Okay, I have several questions about that aspect of the manifesto, but before I get to that, there's a sense, words like provocative and confrontational and getting people going, they have an erotic and, dare I say, perverse element
Mm-hmm.
to them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is there and maybe this is one of the things that the managerial democratic neoliberal class doesn't quite get, is what's the role of erotic energy in all of this in terms of what we can move forward on?
Oh, wow. So if you're familiar with the tie, then you're familiar with what we're doing in a way that a large majority of Republicans and right wingers are not. We're all about the erotic, provoking energy, the taboo, the shadow energy, and bringing that to the surface. The forbidden has been trapped and caged, and by unleashing the forbidden, we're unleashing a metaphysical current. Occult politics comes to mind here. And I don't like using the word occult, just like in everyday life. I think that it's become overused. Everybody's like some kind of cult leader now. But if you think of the notion of occult politics and you think of the metaphysical unleashing in terms of taboo, you can understand what I'm getting at.
There's, I mean, to me, and I don't find a lot of people who can have this conversation with me, but there's something similar to me in um, the way that queer has unfolded and emerged over the 20th century as something that
Mhm.
was oppressed and then kind of identified with its own monstrosity and moved into normalcy, and the
Yeah.
way in which the obscene elements of what appears to be conservative right-wing populism is also bringing forward certain kinds of pleasures and attitudes and things that might previously have been suppressed, and they're asking it to be acknowledged as an open phenomenon of various kinds. I'm curious how you, because you're talking about a futurism that goes beyond left and right. How do you see the left and right versions of that, and how do you see like a kind of very left kind of like queer emergence of perverse pleasure connected to a very right wing emergence of perverse sort of quasi traditionalist indulgences?
Ooh, okay, so end of the manifesto, I talk about how left and right are dust. Let me just read this paragraph so you can understand. Okay, we are not left or right. These labels are dust. Our allegiance is to speed, power, and beauty. We reject both stagnation and nostalgia. The new order is already forming, and we are its architects. We are national futurists, and we will reframing of that word, but more in the energetic current about giving it its libido that has been cucked out by both the left and the right. The left has taken sexuality and turned it into a routine. You now, the whole poly community, it's like about checking off boxes and spreadsheets, to see who you're going to sleep with on Wednesday and then Tuesday. It's disgusting, and the people are gross. It's not real sexuality. And then the right, they're becoming all about breeding. Like I was saying in the beginning, it's like they're like, oh well, you shouldn't have sex if you don't want to have a bunch of babies. Um, Left is wrong, right is wrong. I left and I wronged the right. What we need is actually a bold new sexuality that's more like D'Annunzio during the beginning of the futurist era when he established Fume and he brought together people that were not socially conservative. They were actually very sexually liberal, but they were nationalist in their beliefs. So Yeah, sex is great. I hate that this American Puritan, whatever that is on the right, it's it's ugly. Um, People posting pictures of like, 50s America, it's cope for lower standards of living, like during the COVID regime, when everybody just became socially conservative because the cities were locked down, and it became all about like, okay, I want to be as normal as possible. Like sex is bad and unless you're having babies. No, it's more like sex had been sanitized by the left and the power had been taken out of it. And then the right was suddenly anti-sex. No, what we actually need is like better kink. We need more provocative kink. I think back to like Torture Party, Torture Garden. Torture Garden, it was an event production company in the UK that started throwing parties. You could go to the Torture Garden parties and you could put on an SS uniform, even if you were like a Jewish, far left radical. You could come to these parties and you could put on these military uniforms and you could dance with nationalists who were just like wearing all black, with like maybe like a spiked collar, and everybody was just like in this surrealist, almost like a LARP. It was like a surrealist LARP of people letting out their shadow sexual selves. We had events like that in America, in LA. There was an event called Ghoul School. You had just like punk rockers showing up with like SS armbands and all kinds of cool stuff. People, they might call it like queering fascism. I'll probably get in trouble from both the left and the right for using those terms. But we all know what it is. So I'm too autistic to not say the things on my mind. So there you have it. Queering fascism. We need to like take the government power out of something that could have just been like this beautiful aesthetic movement. Um, it's all about an aesthetic movement. I talked about this way back in the day, when I was on the Stoa. It's an aesthetic movement.
Well, I'm largely behind all of that. I mean, I was a kid who was really
Behind
into
it or
futurism,
behind it?
surrealism, and
Oh, cool.
Dadaism.
Hmm.
I'm
Oh.
very interested in the like Slavoj Žižek position that deconstructed fascist aesthetics is a way to go beyond fashion, whereas the
Mhm.
excising or rejection of fascist aesthetics is a way to keep ourselves within the horizon of fascism.
Right. The
Um,
repression is what's holding us
exactly.
back from expressing
So,
our true sexual nature. Yes.
absolutely, better
Yes.
kink. I'm on board with better kink.
Yes. Okay, cool. I
What I'm
didn't know that you knew
curious about,
that. I didn't know if I was like venturing into schizo territory. I'm like, is this going too far? Okay, cool.
yeah, yes, okay, no, we're
Cool.
all delusions now.
Yay.
Um, So you talk about getting beyond the degrowth era in this
Uh-huh.
manifesto, and when I think about degrowth, it seems to me there's sort of two meanings of it. Like one is a philosophy of human minimalism that is imagined to serve the ecosystem and hold back the rapacious, cancerous growth of modernist thought, and the other is a kind of outcome of institutional or structural modernism in a way that ends up not innovating and not implementing its innovations. And I'm curious how you think of the concept of growth, whether it's quantitative or qualitative, or like, how do we, what's the right kind of growth and what's the wrong kind of growth? This is the question.
The right kind of growth is about revitalization and reanimation. It's about the American spirit coming to life. So, rocket launch. This I love Elon for. Launching rockets. That's the right kind of growth. American defense technology, American dynamism. If you look into the American dynamism movement, that's the right kind of growth. The right kind of growth is the funding of the transgressive arts. It's forming galleries like I'm doing, forming speakeasies, bookstores, movie theaters, new theaters. theaters of self-expression. I'm sure you know Anton or Todd, the theater of cruelty. So you know about this avant-garde, hardcore, expressive current of the counterculture. Where is it in America? Time for us to build it. That's the right kind of growth. What's the wrong kind of growth? Honestly, Twitter right now. Um, Algorithm suppression of people who aren't in with the right click. The wrong kind of growth is just like repeating the same things over and over again to gain attention. The attention economy is the wrong kind of growth. Acting like some kind of spooky, mysterious, like anon figure in order to like get approval, from some. I don't want to get in trouble with this one. I don't think we needed to be anonymous. I think that people got scared during a heightened period of cancellation. And I don't think that hiding is the right kind of growth. I want to see more people with faces and names. I'm sick of like this whole like anon thing. I think that the dissident right is dead. For all practical purposes, we are the right now. Even though we're beyond left and right, we're certainly not dissident anymore. So I don't believe that hiding in like these little corners of the internet and these little group chats, I don't think that that's the right kind of growth. I think that people are too closed. They're too reserved. We need more warmth. The warmth is good. Coldness is bad. We shouldn't have to like keep silent, especially now that the Overton window has been pushed and we have this American frontierism. We shouldn't have to like, socially maneuver in a dull way. That is the wrong kind of growth. The purity spirals are wrong. It's not even that we don't need them. It's that they're implemented incorrectly. The same thing with gatekeeping. It's not that we don't need gatekeeping. It's that we have the wrong gatekeepers. I think that growth is fundamentally about the animation of the spirit, and that anything that de-animates the spirit should not be growing. So growth for the reanimation, and anything that isn't animating, and anything that isn't vitalist, get rid of it, eliminate it. I mean, I should say like that. That's probably like an exaggeration. We need like rational, functional things. But just like in terms of like the art that we're funding and the architecture that we're funding, even like the tech companies that we're funding, if something it's just like a product to like measure people's data. I don't think that should necessarily be funded. Especially when you have all these people that
if you
are,
were if you were Trump's appointee to be in charge of the arts, what would be the general principle that you would use for funding? How would you decide what's viable futurism versus regressive nonsense?
Yeah. Okay. Give me a sec. Well, I mean, I'm not, so I'm just doing that with my gallery. I don't think that I'm going to get into the state. I think that I'm too open and warm, even now. There's a lot of lip service in the Trump administration to people like me. But no, for me, it's exit over voice. I mean, I'm 100% American, and I'm all about America as a nation. I'm all about national futurism. But I don't think that Trump is going to appoint me for anything. So I'm just going to work on my gallery, and we're going to carry the art that I believe is the right art to have in America. We're carrying the art that I love, and we're selling it on commission. We're throwing salons. If you've ever been to like any of my online salons, through my Substack, The Cultural Futurist, you can get an idea of what they're like. We mix speakers and musicians with performers and philosophers. We have poets. We have people that are talking about their strange esoteric ideas. I mean, we kind of put it in a blender. So for me, it's about that type of energy. And I think that beauty itself is playing a huge role in it. A lot of beauty has been eliminated. Just like everything from like protesters that tore down monuments, that tore down statues, that kind of degenerate behavior. And you should always use degenerate properly. It's not degenerate to have gay sex. It's degenerate to tear down monuments and statues, right? That we need to bring back beauty in a way that brings people to heights of spiritual engagement, right? Where people are now on a higher plane of existence. It'd be easy to use the word God here. But I would just say like a higher metaphysical current. And that's the type of beauty that needs to be more in America. So when we're making America beautiful again, that's what I'm referring to. I don't know if Trump would understand this, if we were to like sit down together. He might think that I was just, a little bit too out there. But I think that eventually, the vanguard becomes the mainstream, and like we're not too far. So yeah, anything is possible in the future.
Hmm. So this notion of pulling down statues, I mean, it intrigues me because it sort of feels its way into the line between two perspectives. And the one perspective is we can't move forward unless we enforce the mythic potential of our ancestry. And the other position is it turns out our ancestry was much more complicated and maybe even anti futurist than we thought
Mm,
it
I
was.
see.
How do we handle that? So, when you look at these things, when you look at the pulling down of statues or the critique of inherited American symbols in general, do you think we actually need to embrace the mythicism of this, regardless of what the reality may have been? Or do you think we have to embrace the complication that's introduced by the critique of these figures?
I mean, definitely both, but I'm against erasing history no matter what. There's never an excuse to erase history. You can talk about what was wrong. You should. You should always talk about what was wrong. I don't like that a lot of people on the right, they'll only talk about, like what was right. No pun intended. No, deconstruct to the moon. Talk about what was wrong, but never erase history.
So, one of the things about the collective spirit, assuming we imagine that's a real thing, is that it seems like it needs a shared historical story in order to
Is it?
move forward as a shared future. But
Mm,
we don't necessarily have that shared story. So I'm looking at it as a Canadian, but also it's true of the Americans where there's recent waves of immigration, and then
huh.
there's European colonialism, and then there's the kinds of indigenous people who were here before that, and then there's the kinds of indigenous people who were here way before those people. Do you imagine that there's some kind of like archaeological story that can combine these different waves of history? Or do we have to go to a story where America's an idea and we reject history in order to figure out something we can get together on?
Well, I like how Neil Gaiman did it in American Gods. I think that he honored the tradition of the American lineage without glossing over anything, without being overly woke, but also without, glossing over what happened during these periods of the past before America was founded as a nation. But I think that we should be focusing on the founding of America as a nation, just like as a core principle. Um, I'm not. This is an unpopular opinion. I don't think it's all about storytelling. I mean, I think that more focus should be put on truth and creation, and it's more about the art and the music that you're putting out there. It's not necessarily about like creating a mythology. It's about interacting with the reality of history and what your output is. Like what song are you going to write? What book are you going to write? What story as an author are you going to write and present at a salon? I don't think that everything is about mythology or storytelling.
I'm around a lot of people who are very convinced that the new story, the new narrative is necessary, but I'm always suspicious because they are academically trained, people who grew up
Yeah.
on book education, so of course they assume a top-down narrative is the necessary thing. So, but I'm open to what they're saying. I think there is. Oh, she's gone.
No, no, I just like
Oh,
had to adjust myself because I'm I'm working on my posture,
okay.
transparency. Okay, all right.
All
Back
right,
and ready
you
to
look very well
rumble.
adjusted. Okay.
Woohoo. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. When it comes to like, I very much feel like the vibe is the most important thing. I feel
Yeah,
like,
the
there were
energy.
centuries of building of the Christian spirit before there was an image of anyone on a crucifix. Right. There's a
Right,
certain,
right.
you got to build up this thing that can itself be the evaluator of policies, of candidates, of
Mm-hmm.
symbolism, things like that. So when you think about the art, the music that might be creating the necessary vibe for tomorrow's American spirit, what do you think of? Like, what are some examples for you personally of something that's really fertile, really pregnant with the potential future of the American soul?
I would look at the art of Nigel Close. He's an American artist who focuses on the American spirit. He has a lot of incredible iconography of American figures that were on the frontier of the founding of our nation. I would think about Southern Gothic as a genre, even dark academia. You think of the rich lineage that we have of American authors and literature. Everybody from Kurt Vonnegut to sci-fi author Philip K. Dick to the greats like William Blake, Ezra Pound. We need to be thinking about the American creatives that have put forth this metaphysical current. We need to be following in their footsteps. We need to be finding, scouting, creating, and dare I say, grooming new versions of them. Um, Hollywood 2.0, maybe that's a good way to put it.
Mm.
Without the pedophilia, without the corruption, without the rape. We need like a bold and brave new Hollywood without the corruption. That's what we need.
Um, I love that. I'm a big movie fan. I'm super excited to try to imagine what the Philip K. Dick and the Kurt Vonnegut of tomorrow are going to be like because, for me personally, they summarize and catalyze something about the American and, dare I say, the North American spirit that is
Yeah, yeah.
essential and that I don't hear in political discourse generally.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean
Mm,
that's the
yep.
big thing here. Like Tom Wolfe is another great example.
Yeah, absolutely. When I was a kid, I heard the names of his books. But it wasn't until I read The Right Stuff that I realized both what a great poetic prose writer he
Oh
was, but
yeah.
also how well he captured the uh, the North American 20th
Mm.
century futurist spirit. Because
Oh
it
yeah.
seems like, there's an interesting thing in
Like
terms of
Hunter S.
analyzing cultural
Thompson
phases. Hunter
too.
S. Thompson, absolutely.
Same. Yes.
They were coasting on a spirit in a way, or reflecting a spirit that was willing to radically and immediately implement new discoveries. Right? This is what strikes me about the American spirit during and after the Second World War. That
Mhm.
created new technological discoveries, new intellectual discoveries, and they rapidly implemented them. And then, as much as I have some fondness for Elon Musk, the idea that we've
Right.
just got the electric car, but really we had it in 1940, it's very
Yeah,
depressing. Like, what
it's
is the
true.
deal? Why are we not
Mm,
enacting the discoveries that we
mm.
already have? And it seems like that's a crisis of national character, a crisis of
Oh, yeah.
collective spirit.
You put that very well. I mean, I just think about like even the monorails. Elon had promises to build a monorail. I think it was from LA to San Francisco. Don't quote me on that. But I think it would be cool to have monorails throughout all of America. High speed transportation. People talk about like the space elevator. But what about monorails? What about like really, really fast vehicles taking people from New York City to San Francisco? What about that? So you think about the strong lineage of American authors that captured this metaphysical energy that animated America as a nation. You think about the musicians like Tom Waits who have done that, right? You think like, okay, we have the Rolling Stones and we have the Doors, and we have Pink Floyd. Okay, well now we have Radiohead, we have Tool, right? Who are the bands today that are catalyzing that? And also, how does that tie in to the revitalization of the cities? Well, say you're on tour, and you're on a high speed vehicle that's taking you from New York City to San Francisco, and you're playing a show in both of these cities. Well, say now it only takes you 2 hours. So it takes you 1 hour to get from New York to San Francisco. You could play 2, 3, 4 shows in one day. So we would be accelerating and we would be highly advancing the music culture, the literary culture, if you're doing a book tour, endless possibilities.
Yeah, there's an interesting thing to me around the Trump administration and the sort of quasi-right authoritarian thing that's emerging in America, which is they want to make some, in a way, casual and bold evaluation choices. And I'm not against that in principle, right? I remember when Trump was like talking about shithole countries, right? And like,
Right,
that's interesting.
right.
He's trying to
Yeah,
make an evaluation, right?
sure.
But the evaluation is not necessarily about how much money you have or what your skin color is. I would love to see a Trump where what he thinks is important to let into the country is Radiohead, right? That he could
Mm-hmm.
recognize
Yeah.
complex, advanced, leading
Well,
edge artistic and cultural phenomena as what America needs to absorb.
oh man, you're dreaming. So yeah, I am on the same page. This is why I like Fume and the Italian Futurist era. That was the D'Annunzio project. Marinetti didn't even come until later. Initially, it was D'Annunzio, and he created a nation state that let their radioheads out of Italy come in. That was actually what it was about. It was a nation of artists. That was what it was about. A nation of artists. That was the core principle of Fume. And I don't think we can expect Donald Trump to understand this. JD Vance, I'm sure he'll hear it through the grapevine. I'm sure he'll get a word about it. But we need to be realistic. This is where we need to implement realpolitik, right? We need to implement realpolitik. We can't pretend like just because, Trump has helped us get away from the tyranny of the neoliberal hell state that he's on our level, like creatively or intellectually. We can't assume that. I mean, like we're small avant-garde, we're national futurists. We're MAGA, but we're a faction of MAGA. We're factionalists, and we need to be open about that. I think, just tell the truth. Is that a radical notion? No, you tell the truth. It's like, yeah, we
Yeah,
want a
I think
nation
it
of
is.
artists. We want a nation of artists. Not that shithole countries are good. I don't think we need to like give shithole countries lip service. I mean, we need to call them out for what they are. And I say that because in America, a lot of America is turning into a shithole. And when it comes to the revitalization of the cities, right? Well,
Mm,
bringing the cities back to life, it is going to require that we get rid of the shithole esque elements of them. Um, the shithole esque elements of the cities are holding back the artists, right? Because if you think about like the cost of living in a city like New York, where the rent is exorbitantly high, well, it's not going to help if you have all these horrible living conditions and, people walk into them if they're not like necessarily, millionaires. They have to live among areas of crime, where they become victims of, horrible acts, just because that they can't like afford to live in a place that would be more conducive to their well-being. So I think we definitely do need to tackle the shithole-esque nature of the cities, and we do need to get rid of it, and we need to make it so more housing is available. I don't want to turn into like a YIMBY activist right now, but I think you see what I'm getting at.
mhm. Okay, there's I mean, you mentioned the revitalization of the cities in the National Futurist Manifesto, and I'm curious where you think, like, what scale of American politics is the most problematic? Because when I look at it, it seems to me there are some things that only a federal government can do. Right. And
Right.
there are some things that only a regional or city-based government can understand in terms of direct, pragmatic action. But then I see 50 states between these, and in Canada, 10 to 15 provinces in the middle. And these are relics of a 19th century organizational model, and yet they put an entire level of bureaucracy and decision making and monetary control between cities and people on the ground and the actual federal government. So, from my point of view, I constantly wonder whether or not we would be better off if we removed states and just had a regional to federal system of some kind. But I'm curious where you think the most problematic layer of governance is. Is it city? Is it regional? Is it state? Is it federal? Where's the problem?
Well, I think that we need more states. I think that network states are obviously the future of America. I think that in a way, network states are kind of like the new startups. You used to found a company, now you found a country. But the country that you found, it can be inside of a state or a city. So I think that we're witnessing the diamond age in real life, where we have a bunch of like competing different cities that are like their own companies, almost like a neo-feudalist open market. And you go from one city to the next, and they're smaller, they're little cities, they're little network states, and you're kind of like you're ambassadoring between them, right? And so I think that that is important, right? Okay, you build your own TAS, and temporary autonomous zone was a concept that was created by Hakim Bey, the post-left anarchist philosopher, right? But when they did like the whole Taz thing in Seattle, like with the dumb Antifa kids, they kind of ruined the idea. Where the origin of the Taz, the temporary autonomous zone, was just a network state, a zone in which people of like mind could interact and live in their own way, do things how they wanted to do without the control of a central authority. You could call it, like anarchist collectives, in a way, but they're not collectivist, right? They're individualists. So you've just got groups of like people self-governing together, like people self-governing together, but in their own city state on their own terms.
Mm.
So radical new forms of government are emerging. All sorts of different hybridizations of, like local level governance.
Mm. So, if I go to dinner with Alexander Bard, and he buys me a delicious steak, as he did the last time, there's a sense that the network civilization and the network state is superseding, eroding, and undermining the nation states of the world. And you seem to be in favor of both the network state and in favor of the nation state, in particular the American nation state. How do you juggle that sense of fidelity to a cultural zone and this sense of an emerging network based planetary non nation state kind of civilization?
I mean, that's really easy to answer because Alexander Bard is very wrong about this. And a lot of his philosophy, it's just based on what he thinks will get him the most female attention. So I wouldn't really take anything that he says seriously, especially not in this. It's really easy to answer this. If you have a bunch of different network states within a nation, the growth of the nation increases. The nation is better because the network states in the nation are better. I mean, obviously, if New York and Texas and Denver are better, America is going to be better. I don't understand like why that doesn't make sense to people. So if you've got, like 10 different network states in New York, that's going to make New York better. And that's going to make America better. Or what's the contradiction in that? Doesn't make sense.
All right. There's a
Not trying to get too personal, but I mean
yeah,
it's an
that's all
obvious
right.
answer. Like if the things on your territory are better, your territory is going to get better.
Yeah.
Like
I,
it's
I think
yeah
that's true, and I also think that there's a lot of features of network civilization that are going to force nation states to double down on their own
yeah.
identity. Um, Speaking of futurism, so I mean, I feel like I grew up in a way where my family was very oriented to emerging technology and emerging social realities. So I'm uh, domestically predisposed to being futurist in my temperament. And I look at
Well,
things like the argument about transgender, and I think this is already outdated, right?
it
We should be
is.
talking about
Who
trans
cares?
species, not bathrooms.
Yeah, yeah.
I
Seriously,
also look at the current American election. I go, did anybody even mention AI in the entire American election cycle?
it's really sad that they didn't. Yeah. Now we're
So,
talking.
yeah. So, like, what do you, as someone with a futurist soul, what are you not hearing? What are you frustrated by in the American political discourse?
I mean, this might be a personal answer, but I'm gonna get called feminine for this, like even answering it this way. But I'm frustrated with the people that are canceled me in Silicon Valley are now working for the Trump administration. That the people that like parroted my ideas are now actually working for the White House. So I'm frustrated with the corruption. I'm also frustrated with how people don't talk about ideas until they gain enough popularity. We shouldn't have to wait until like the critical mass of people have adapted something to like discuss it on the political stage. I think that if Trump notices something cool, that he should discuss it right away. He shouldn't wait until he has like, Elon Musk's approval, like let Trump be Trump. Let Trump do the Trump thing. Like look what happens when you try to control him. Just like let him be himself. Let him live. Let Trump live his life. Don't try to control everything. I don't like the idea of government overreach. The Republicans they're better than the Democrats and less overreach. But they want to control things too much. And like we should let America be free, right? America the free. Whatever happened to that?
Wow, LTL, let Trump live. Okay, interesting.
Yeah, let America be free. Like we need more freedom in America. Like we're at a critical mass of Overton window shifting now. Like we've done it. We've crossed the metaphorical Rubicon. We don't need to worry about these cancellations anymore. The left, that they've the fluid blue sky, right? We have more freedom than we've ever had in America, but we're still too restricted by the binds of the state apparatus.
Okay, is there, I mean, it's a very interesting kind of a pseudo paradox for people who want freedom to elect authoritarians. And we see this internationally as well as in the United States. And on the one hand, it seems to me like the pressures of the emerging world situation require enhancement of executive control. And we're seeing China kind of thrive with a traditionalist story and increased executive control over the market in its nation. We probably
No,
have to
this
do,
is
no? Yeah,
bad.
what do you got?
This is bad. We need to be more like Milei in Argentina. Milei, he
Hmm.
understands what needs to happen. He's doing a great job. And yeah, like sure he has resistance, but he also has diehard supporters. Everything that China has done, is like this collectivist authoritarian, like the CCP is evil. Like it's all about like collectivism. Collectivism is evil. It takes the spirit away from the individual.
I'm I'm not sure. I could go both ways. When I look at it, I think from my point of view, China and Millet are doing something very similar, which is that their nation states are adapting to uh, populist, traditionalist, ethnocentric
Hmm. Okay.
storytelling
Okay.
with enhanced executive control, and that every country is going to have to
Hmm.
do some version of that in order to cope
Hmm.
with the
Okay.
21st century.
That's fascinating. I think that Alexander Dugin did predict this about 10 years ago. When he spoke of multipolarity, this is what he was talking about. And we definitely are in a multipolar era, and we should acknowledge that first and foremost.
Do you think the modernist fantasy of government, whatever the reality was, the fantasy was judicial, legislative, and executive counterbalancing. Uh, can that hold going forward, or do we need more executive control in order to be both more agile and more aligned with the spirit of the nations?
So, I mean, I'm against executive overreach, like I was saying before. And when I said collectivism was evil, I was talking about that executive overreach. I wasn't talking about like groups of like minded individuals getting together and forming a network state. That's why I was hesitant to use the term anarcho collectivism, because collectivism, it can mean, executive overreach, or it can mean just like minded people getting together and forming their own thing, which I highly encourage. What I don't want to see is America become more like China. What I don't want to see is for us to lose our individual freedom. I don't think that we elected an authoritarian. I don't believe that Trump is an authoritarian at all. I believe that he's against authoritarianism. That's why, like he was people tried to assassinate him is because he was so vocally against it. So I think we need less authoritarianism, but we need like more on the ground nation founding. We need more beautifully American constructed civilizations within America. And America itself as a nation needs to grow and animate. And I don't think that we need to do that by creating more bureaucracy.
Mm.
And one thing I love about Elon, despite, like my grievances with him, is that he wants to dismantle the entire thing, like Curtis Garvin, retire all government employees. Elon wants to do that. He wants to get rid of the incompetent bureaucrats that have held us back. And the National Futurist Manifesto, I talk about how bureaucrats, they worship the past. They've held us back. We have to get through the red tape just to do basic things. I mean, look at the broken healthcare system. Look at what happens when somebody wants to get surgery. Look at what they have to go through to file a claim, just to take care of an ailment. I think we need to dismantle all of that.
How do we adjudicate between fewer or disempowered bureaucrats and better bureaucrats? Because it seems like the complexity of the world we're moving into, on the one hand, it needs a decentralization and a freeing of the creative power of individuals and joint projects. But on the other hand, there's so much um, historically accumulated and meta level international problem to solve that it may be that we require a much larger amount of central organization and central planning and reformulation of how we look after and cultivate our citizenry, right? So, like, what's the balance between liberating people to be adaptive to the emerging circumstance and creating national structure that stabilizes
I see.
people and makes them safe to engage in the new circumstances?
Okay, that's a good question. I do not have the answer to it. It's such a complex series of occurrences. I mean, I would start with just everybody is different. What's going to work for one person might not work for somebody else. What's going to work for one region of America might not work for another. Obviously, people in Alabama aren't going to agree with people in San Francisco. Yeah, that kind of thing. I also think that it's hard for people to reconcile. Much of the right is still very anti-intellectual. Much of the left is still very, like pro-cancel culture, like wokeness to the max. They're still, we don't have to hear about them anymore as much, but they're still, pushing for those types of agendas. So I don't think that you can use a one size fits all approach in governance. I think that it needs to be on an individual level.
When you look at your own views, do you hesitate relative to the fact that you are contemporary, well-educated, and white, or is that, you know, fine? Because there's the question of like, do these views apply generally to a wide variety of demographics who have come
Hmm.
into the American situation through different histories, or are these attitudes specifically attractive to somebody who
I
grew up
see.
understanding about futurism and
Um,
surrealism and being
I
white?
I'm okay. So, like, I'm definitely weird, but I didn't have a standard education. I started my first company was when I was in art school. I also went through homelessness. I'm not, like an Ivy League educated person who has had those types of luxuries. So I think it's like ridiculous to call me privileged just because I have white skin. I don't think that most people could have gotten through the life that I did and emerged how I have. I'm going to leave it at that. But I will still answer your question. We don't need a one size fits all approach because people have different outlooks and different levels of understanding, and they have different circumstances. We should have things work for them individually. It's not about like applying the same framework to everybody in America. It's about individual frameworks. It's going to be different for everyone. We need to acknowledge and recognize difference. Um, that's one thing I disagree with the right on. Difference should be celebrated, and we shouldn't apply the same standards to everybody.
What is the, from your view, best case outcome of the next 4 years? So, there's a Trump administration, and then there's whatever comes next. But from your point of view, what's the best possible Trump administration? In 4 years, where do we end up in the position that's maximally available to a futurist future?
So I think it starts with getting offline. We've been very coddled by this algorithm that tells us what we want to hear, but it's now not sustainable because it's become an echo chamber with a bunch of spam. So the ultimate American project, it's growth in the cities, it's growth in the rural areas too, more openings of more places, more things to do, a complete American boom, a complete economic resurfacing of creative American frontier energy. It's all about the economy. People, they didn't vote on abortion. It wasn't some fertility thing. It wasn't like we need to like go back to the 50s. No, people voted on the economy. So on stagnation. an American boom that takes people off of the internet and brings them back to real life. So they can go to museums and they can go to galleries, they can go to theaters, they can go to speakeasies, they can join a different speakeasies as members with people that they can relate to, where they can talk about what they want, perform for each other, with each other. A complete American economic boom of creativity and innovation.
Hmm. I in a couple of months ago, I led a retreat on integral views on anomalous entities. Was in British Columbia on the west coast in Canada, where I grew up. And most of the people there were American. And we were walking down the beach, and there were houses, very wealthy looking houses with Canadian flags. And some of the Americans said to me, uh, "Do Canadian flags here mean the same thing that American flags mean in America?" And it
Ooh.
was a very interesting question. And I'm
Okay.
curious, when you see a prominently displayed American flag, what's your assumption about what that means?
I believe that it means America the Beautiful. Now, this is one thing that is one size fits all. And an American flag, it means America the Beautiful. That's what it stands for. That's why it's up there. America is beautiful, and the American flag represents that beauty.
Nice. Okay, I guess we're basically at the end of our discussion here. Is there anything I should have asked you about the American spirit that I didn't?
No, I think you asked a lot of good questions, and I liked getting into the more nuanced details with you. I think you were a good person to talk to about this kind of thing. I'd like to speak to more people like you about this, especially in a time of multipolarity. We need a diverse sector of voices that might not necessarily agree on everything, but that understand the things that are going on a more metaphysical level. You know, that there was a lot of metaphysical current, the metaphysical currents that are happening right now are not picked up on by everybody. And I think that those of us who do pick up on them need to get together and talk and debate and come to new revelations with each other so we can build as philosophers.
Yeah, I agree completely. And a lot of the people that I've talked to in this series have been very past facing in their
Mhm.
sense of the American spirit and sense of national spirit generally, rather than future facing. I think that needs to
Mm,
change. And I also think that won't change unless people are more generally informed by cultural, artistic, and philosophical trends and complexities that we inherit from the last couple of hundred years. So I really
mhm.
appreciate this discussion, Rachel. Nice to
Yeah,
meet you.
yeah. Thank you for having me on your show, and I've enjoyed speaking with you too.